Hey, you guys, Brother John checking in for Wednesday in the Word. Hope things are going well for you out there. As you can see, back in the church office after a few weeks quarantined at home because of COVID in the family. And so we appreciate y'all's prayers and concerns and all of that. It was good to be back at church on Sunday as we continue to go through the Sermon on the Mount. We're getting towards the end of that, and so I think I know where we're going on Sunday mornings after that, but we'll have to see. But today we continue to go through great chapters in the Bible. That's what we've been doing on Wednesdays. And last week we were in Acts chapter 2 from the kitchen there at our house. And this week we're going to go to the other end of the Bible. And we're going to be in Genesis chapter 11 with the Tower of Babel. Now, let me give you a little context here about what's been going on in Genesis 10. Well, really Genesis 9. In Genesis 9, Noah comes off the ark and all those things, that the aftermath are established. In chapter 10, we get a genealogy, and in that genealogy, we hear about the sons of Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and the people that come from them. With Shem being the Semitic people, ultimately where the nation of Israel would come. Japheth really being what you and I would think of as European descent. And then Ham really heading south towards Africa and Arabia and that part of the world. And so you get this really detailed description about all the different generations. And what happens is in the narrative, Genesis 11 actually backs up a little bit and explains how those people that are described in chapter 10 come to be so spread out throughout the known world. And that happens because of the Tower of Babel. And so let me read it to you. It's an interesting little story. It's only 9 verses, and I'll read the whole thing. Why not? Then we'll go through it. It says, "Now the whole earth used the same language and the same words. It came about as they journeyed east, they found a plain in the land of Shinar and settled there. They said to one another, 'Come, let us make bricks and burn them thoroughly.' And they used bricks for stone, and they used tar for mortar. They said, 'Come, let us build for ourselves a city and a tower whose top will reach into heaven. And let us make for ourselves a name, otherwise we will be scattered abroad over the face of the whole earth.'" So remember, Genesis 10 has just told us that they've been scattered. This is going to tell us why and how. Verse 5, "The Lord came down to see the city and the tower which the sons of men had built. The Lord said, 'Behold, they are one people, and they all have the same language. And this is what they began to do.'" And this is what they began to do, and now nothing which they propose to do will be impossible for them. "Come, let us go down there and confuse their language, so that they will not understand one another's speech." So the Lord scattered them abroad there over the face of the whole earth, and they stopped building the city. Therefore its name was called Babel, because the Lord there confused the language of the whole earth. We still use that language. We're talking about people babbling when you can't understand them. And from there the Lord scattered them abroad over the face of the whole earth, which is what chapter 10, the chapter preceding this, then has already described to us. So it's very interesting what's going on here with the Tower of Babel. It says in verse 1, the whole earth used the same language and the same words, which makes sense because they all come from Shem, Ham, and Japheth, from the children of Noah. So that's the foundation. Of course they would speak the same language. The Shem would have taught his kids, who would have taught his kids, so it's in the family, in other words. So everybody's speaking the same language. Everybody knows what everybody else is saying. Well, it says in verse 2, "It came about as they journeyed east that they found a plain in the land of Shinar and settled there." Shinar is an interesting area. It's, as you know, because this is the Tower of Babel, eventually this area will be known as Babylon. It's been pointed out that the Tigris and the Euphrates, flow through this area, and that both of them flowed through the Garden of Eden. So it's almost that idea of returning to that general area of where the garden may have been. We don't know that for sure. There was such destruction after the flood. There's no telling how all that stuff laid out before And so and there's a lot of language though, this idea of being rejected and being cast out that's reminiscent of the garden. So they're all there, they settle, and in verse 3 it says, they said to one another, come, let us make bricks and burn them thoroughly. And they use brick for stone and tar for mortar. So they start this building program. And they're going to build a tower, probably what's known as a ziggurat, those stair step sort of towers that you see in that part of the world, and also in Central and South America with the Incas and the Mayans. And I may be really messing up that history there. I don't tell Donna that I can't remember Incans, Mayans. They may have both done it. I don't know. Y'all seen the pictures anyway. You know what I'm talking about. That same kind of thing. They didn't have the technology to build straight up. They had to stair step this thing. But notice the self-centered language in verse 4. They said, come, let us build for ourselves. So let us build for ourselves. So very self-centered, which is basically what paganism is. It's you're going to worship something. And ultimately, if you reject the true God, you end up worshiping yourself. Even idolatry ends up being worship of the self, because idols are made in the image of man. Any false gods where you go to mythology or whatever it might be, they're always created in man's image. Those gods are sinful. Those gods are evil. Those gods do terrible things. Where you and I, who follow the true God, know that we're created. Was that Bill that just went by? I he's caught it out of the corner of my eye. And so, we're created in God's image. We know the true God. We know the truth. And lost people don't. And paganism ultimately is about selfishness. It's about people creating gods, little gods, in their own image. And so we see the foundation of that here, the self-centeredness in these folks. So come, let us, this is verse 4 again, come, let us build for ourselves a city and a tower whose top will reach into heaven. They're going to lift themselves up. And let us, again, that self-centered language, let us make for ourselves a name, otherwise we will be scattered abroad over the face of the whole earth. They're saying, let's stay here. We're going to stay here together, and we're going to raise ourselves up. Now, they knew the truth. The gospel was out there in Old Testament form. The truth about the true God was out there because Noah knew the true God, and so those stories would be passed down for generations. So we're not told how much they know about the truth, but there are people who know the truth about the Creator and about the world and about how it exists and why it exists, and they're rejecting all of that and making it very much hey, look at us, aren't we great? We're awesome. Let's build this big tower to show the world how awesome we are, and let's all stay here together and be pagan together and be all about ourselves. Well, verse 5. The Lord came down to see the city and the tower which the sons of men had built. God comes down and checks it out. Now, obviously, God is everywhere. The Father is Spirit. The Holy Spirit is Spirit. God the Son, Jesus is eternal. All that was Bill. He just came back. If you saw him there, and so you have this eternal God who is omniscient and omnipresent, and yet there are times, especially in the Old Testament, to prefigure what Jesus did. God comes down in physical form, and we see that several times. And so here he comes down. He's going to check things out and look around, even though technically he didn't have to. He decides to come do that because this is very, very similar to the Garden of Eden, where God is walking in the cool of the day, and he's physically present before mankind is cast out. So there's some parallel going on here. Verse 6, the Lord said, behold, they are one people, and they all have the same language. And this is what they began to do. And now nothing they purpose to do will be impossible for them. God created us to be pretty smart. And we can do some stuff when we really set our minds to it. I mean, we put a man on the moon and created all kinds of medicines and amazing inventions and build skyscrapers and, all these, tunnels that trains and subways and cars go through, just amazing things that we can do because God gave us a mind. And so these people are really doing something amazing here. They've put their minds to it. They're working together, and God says, okay, this whole self-centered deal, this raising up of themselves, this denying who God is, he's going to put a stop to it. Verse 7, come, let us, so now the us is God, But when God says us, he's referring, it's getting us ready for the Trinity, the fact that he's Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. The us for the people in Babylon was a self-centered, hey, look at us, look at us. The us here for God is this is the Trinity. This is the Godhead. This is us getting ready to see that, to understand this more fully in the New Testament than we do here, but God speaking in the plural of himself. So verse 7, come, let us go down there and confuse their language so that they will not understand one another's speech. So that's what he's going to do. Verse 8, so the Lord scattered them abroad there over the face of the whole earth, and they stopped building the city. They just stopped right in the middle and left it there and ultimately spread out. Therefore, its name was called Babel, that sound of babbling, that incoherent language, because the Lord confused the language of the whole earth. And there the Lord scattered them abroad over the face of the whole earth. Imagine what happened. This is how when I think about this. The Lord comes down and everybody's speaking the same language, whatever language that was, and then suddenly you're not, and you can't understand the person next to you, and they can't understand you. But what I think probably happened was there were people around. You would be drawn to the people you could understand. And so, that's here the people groups start to form. So suddenly you can't understand the guy working next to you as you're building this tower, but 2 or 3 people over, you can understand them. So you walk over to that person, you're like, what in the world's going on here? But I can't understand these people. And so you find other people who sound like you. So now the groups are formed. They can't understand one another, but it's not like there was one individual language for every single person. They're broken up into groups. So they sort of find people that they can understand, and then they start to spread out. And ultimately, that's what chapter 10, this is chapter 11, what chapter 10 describes is what happens after this as they all spread out throughout. Now, what was the issue here? Well, the issue was pride. The issue was paganism. It was self-centeredness. The point of chapter 11, there's a lot of points to chapter 11, but the one to think about is that God humbles the proud. Those who are self-centered, those who are about themselves and not about the glory of God, God will humble them, if not in this world, certainly in the next. Let me just read you a couple of verses. Proverbs 16:18, pride goes before destruction, and a haughty spirit before stumbling. Proverbs 11:2, when pride comes, then comes dishonor, but with the humble is wisdom. Or Proverbs 29:23, a man's pride will bring him low, but a humble spirit will obtain honor. These people were going to lift themselves up out of pride, out of selfishness, out of self-centeredness, out of godless, because of godlessness, and make this tower that reached into the heavens and to lift themselves up, and God put an end to it. Now, this is the interesting thing. You have here in Genesis 11 a division because of language. And I'm sure I'm not the only preacher and Bible teacher that's ever pointed this out to you. But on the day of Pentecost, you kind of have Babel reversed. Not exactly, it's not a one-to-one thing, but language had been a barrier. And when you get to Acts 2, language isn't a barrier anymore. It's sort of a reversal of Babel in some ways. Let me read it to you. Acts 2, verse 1, it says, when the day of Pentecost had come, they were all together in one place, and suddenly there came from heaven a noise like a violent rushing wind, and it filled the whole house where they were sitting. And there appeared to them tongues as of fire distributing themselves, and they rested on each one of them. And they were all filled with the Holy Spirit and began to speak with other tongues, as the Spirit was giving them utterance. As you trace this idea of tongues throughout the New Testament, these are known languages that the speaker doesn't know. So it's not gibberish, it's not things it's not babbling. It's a language that people can understand, but it's a language that the person who's speaking it didn't have prior training in. It'd be like me suddenly starting to speak in Russian. People who spoke that language could understand it, but I have no clue right now about how to speak Russian. So these are known languages being spoken by people who didn't know them, but people who were listening did know them. I hope that makes sense. Verse 5, there were Jews living in Jerusalem, devout men from every nation under heaven. And when this sound occurred, the crowd came together and were bewildered. Each one of them was hearing them speak in his own language. So suddenly, Peter and John and Matthew and those guys are speaking in different languages. They're not speaking in Hebrew or Aramaic or anything. They're speaking in languages that these people understand, that are their heart language, the languages they were raised with, in other words. It says they were amazed and astonished. This is verse 7. Why are not all these who are speaking Galileans? They were totally confused. And how is it that we each hear them in our own language to which we were born? Parthians and Medes and Elamites and residents of Mesopotamia, Judea, Cappadocia, Pontus and Asia, Phrygia and Pamphylia, Egypt and districts of Libya around Cyrene, and visitors from Rome, both Jews and proselytes, Cretans and Arabs, we hear them in our own tongues, speaking of the mighty deeds of God. And they all continued in amazement and great perplexity, saying to one another, what does this mean? But others were mocking and saying they are full of sweet wine. So on the day of Pentecost, God takes that hindrance that language is and just eliminates that hindrance, and gives the gift of speaking in known languages which are unknown to the speaker to reach people. For the gospel. And that's the point of tongues, is to reach people for the gospel of Christ, and to validate the message, and to show people that God is doing something very unique there. So they're separated by language at the Tower of Babel, and then they're brought together by language in Acts chapter 2. And remember the description all throughout the New Testament, that ultimately heaven consists of every tribe, every tongue, every nation. And so language ultimately isn't a barrier because of the blood of Christ. And what is set up, that division that's set up at Babel, that God set up, he just as easily knocks it down in Acts 2. And it's not a barrier at all eternally, because we all, if we hear the gospel, we hear it in our language, we respond. All different nationalities, people from all over the world are going to be in heaven together. So it's really no division. It's something that God overcomes, because he's the one that set it up in the first place. So, well, that's the Tower of Babel. In other words, don't be proud. God will humble you. And it's not about us. It's about him. And it's about the fact that God has provided he has provided rescue from that division that sin causes, that language causes, all those things that we see, that paganism that we see demonstrated there in Genesis chapter 11. Well, guys, that's this week's Wednesday in the Word. And so I hope you have a good rest of the week and weekend. It's hot out there, so watch yourself. Don't get too hot, and stay safe, stay healthy, wear your mask, and we'll see everybody on Sunday.